Good evening guys, this is the next video in my cassette series. This is a Nakamichi BX-2. So this is a two-head Nakamichi deck from about 1981. It's coming off eBay with various faults. Won't play, won't fast forward, won't eject, blah blah blah. Pretty straightforward deck, but quite well regarded. It would have been top of the shop for a two-head deck when this was released, and I'm quite looking forward to getting into it and giving it the works. So it's going to be a case of fix all the problems, probably do the belt singular. I believe it's only got one. I think there's a rubber tyre that controls the playback, and then we'll calibrate it correctly and do the azimuth and everything we usually do. So let's plug it in and see what it is like at the moment. So we're in, and let's press our power button over here. Lights up nicely in the 80s style-y. It's got Dolby C noise reduction on it, which I thought was quite unusual for the age. Lights all light up. Equalizer, we've got tape selector, MPX filter. These feel a bit grainy, should we say. Interesting, it's going to play without a tape in it, which is unusual. So maybe there's a tape sensor switch issue. That does work without a tape in it. Maybe when it's got a bit of feedback on it, it won't. We have memory play, memory stop. And I believe it has, it doesn't have an eject issue. That's weird. That was one of the main, so the mechanism seems to be getting a bit stuck. So let's see what it does with a tape in it, which is as usual is Bruce. And we'll give it a rewind. Very slow. Fast forward, nothing. Play, nothing. And that is it. So I think we've got a problem with the transport, with the playback, whether it's the belt or I believe the playback motor is direct drive kind of thing. It's on a cog. So we'll have to have a look at that, find out what's going on with that. It's just like a rubber tyre around it usually. And I think we've also got an issue with that eject button. But everything else on the front seems to be good. So let's rip the top off and see what's obvious. First of all, then we'll look at the eject mechanism. It seems that the button doesn't want to come back out. Whether that's... Oh, actually the mechanism isn't sticky at all. So is it? The button's a bit sticky. Maybe we can remove the button and give it a polish or something. It seems very dry. I don't want to grease it, but it needs something. So that's good. Okay. So there's the first thing. Upon inspecting inside, everything looks in pretty good order on the board. All our pots and trimmers there, all grouped together, look like they haven't really been fiddled with. They're all kind of symmetrical. All the caps look fine. So we'll put our attention towards the transport. First issue you can see there is that straight away the screw's missing. So there should be a couple of screws, and we just get a pointing stick. Yeah, we've got screws missing there and there. This one seems a bit loose. I think there should be some screws in the bottom as well. So someone's definitely had a play in here. The main capstan belt is there. Let's spin it around. Yeah, so as you can see, the main capstan belt is actually in place, but we're going to replace that anyway. Nice that the motor's also Nakamichi on them. I like that. That is a nice touch. So the belt's in place. So I'm going to towards the idler tyre, I think. It seems to be wobbly on its feet. So maybe one of the feet is missing. No. It seems like it's been pushed up. Maybe somebody's put a bit of a lean on it. This front foot that you can see there seems to be pressed in a little bit, so we can maybe have a look at that. It should be the same height, so that's not so much a mechanical fix, but it's wobbly on its feet. Got a bent chassis. So let's have a look at the heads and whatnot. Yeah, that eject button's just sticking in there, look. I think we can work that out. That's not a problem. Let's just pop our... That feels loose. And the back of it is in good order. All the clips are there, so maybe just needs a little... Sometimes these have like a piece of felt tape underneath just to keep it a little bit tighter. I think we'll put some felt tape on there. Not a felt tip, some felt tape. And the heads, if I can look in there, heads look to be in good order. That pinch roller is absolutely knackered. Look at that. That is toast. So we'll buy one of them. Capstan also is absolutely minging. So we'll pull that out, clean that up. Give that a bloody good going over, I think. But the two heads themselves look pretty good. Nobody's messed with the azimuth. Although we'll test and rectify the azimuth anyway. Alright, not a bad start really. I think the first thing we need to do is to probably remove this transport, fix everything on the chassis and the unit, and then replace the transport once we've done all bits and bobs on it. So weirdly, as you can see, this is a bit bent, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws in the corners, and then there's one at the back there to remove it. Pretty big screws, pretty straightforward to get off. Alright, so somehow this bottom left hand corner here is absolutely bent to buggery. I think this is a lot of where the transport and eject issues is coming from, so I'm going to try and attempt to bend it here with my hands, which it doesn't go very well, but a little bit of time with a pair of pliers and it's straight as an arrow now. It's actually tougher than it looks, so I don't particularly know how this has happened, but we're now sorted. That's job 1 is done, and it'll sit straight now. Whenever you sit it on a bench or whatever, you know, it's not rattling about all over the place. So after that, then you take this alloy faceplate off, and there's these plastic clips here. And basically, you push the middle bit in, and then slowly lift the alloy cover off. Once you've got these 2 screws out, then that's ready to come off. There's one this end, and then there's one at the other end underneath this piece of foam. Once they're out, you can just unclip it and it'll lift away. So what I do want to do as well is remove this this guard from the transport. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws there, and then just flip it over and lift it out. Once that's out though, just keep it on one side, keep the screws separate because they're all different. And this arm on the right here is just floating now, so this can be removed just to keep it safe. And with this being plastic hinges onto a metal chassis, just have a look, make sure they're not damaged. We'll clean and grease them up later on though. These look a bit manky, should we say. So now it's time to move the transport. So you've got 1 screw on the top with this spiky washer. You notice that just pops out there. And then you got 1, 2 screws underneath, and it's just a case of same thing again, supporting the weight of the transport so it doesn't drop. Removing them, and then the transport can be drawn backwards. And once that's out, this metal face plate will come out as well. I've already took the 2 screws out for that, but you can't take it out without removing the transport. These are plugged in with a couple of plugs, but there is one wire that's soldered if you want to fully remove it. So here we have the issue, this rubber tyre here then. That gold bit in the middle is your main motor there, and as that turns round it moves that tyre left and right to each reel, and the tyre gets perished and knackered and a bit smaller over time and causes the playback issues. You see if I put some pressure on it there, it will actually turn the reel fine, and it is turning without taping, so it's just that little bit of extra pressure is not allowing it to run. So we'll remove that and renew it. While I've got it off here, I want to pull this eject button out because it is sticky. It seems like it's scratched. I have a feeling that it was the bent base plate that was maybe putting a bit too much pressure on one corner, but it's just a couple of clips here and two underneath, and then you just pull it forwards and it should pop out. Just make sure you don't lose a spring. Once them clips are undone, then just very gently just pop it out, because you aren't going to find another one of these. And just watch that spring doesn't fall out. And you can see there's some rubbing on the top where it's been catching there, so I'll probably polish that out, I think, with a bit of plastic polish. As you can see in here, so now we've got a bit more space. That pinch roller's manky, the capstan there's manky as well. I thought it was rust, but it just looks like it's old tape or something, just lack of cleaning. So I lifted this tyre off and this just pulls off. It's a bit of a pain, but once you've got half of it off, it'll just lift out and you can inspect that. Apparently you can turn them inside out, but this is totally knackered. So this is getting renewed with a nice new one. Pinch roller I removed, removing the C-clip, and upon looking at it, it looks totally fine. And I don't think it's original, because I heard the originals were metal. This to me is absolutely fine and serviceable. It's just dirty. So I'm going to give it a bit of a clean. We've got a little bit of a renew, sanded a little bit of the shininess off, a good clean, and it's absolutely fully serviceable. I have no problem using this pinch roller. If it causes issues later, then maybe we'll change it, but it's fine for now. So in order to refit it then, the pin is a tapered pin. So I'll put a little bit of, tiny bit of oil on the inside there. And then you need to put the axle back through it, and it just sits in there like that. And then we'll get the axle, pop that in as far as you can go, and then you just need to hammer it home. So I've got this little staking block and a little watchmaker's hammer. And it's just a case of just a couple of little taps. That seats it. And then just a few more light taps just to make it equidistant between the two posts. Alright, that's us. So now this is ready to refit. It's just held in place by a small C-clip, which likes to fly away, so be careful. So we've now got the transport out, and it was pretty straightforward actually. I thought there was a wire that was soldered in, which was the earth wire to the chassis, but in actual fact it was screwed in. It was just difficult to see the screw. So what you've got is a standard collection of plugs that I just unplugged from the board. I didn't see the point in showing you that because you can all unplug plugs. And then there was one screw on this side, which is a blue wire, and that's the earth. So I've just unscrewed that and then removed the transport in order to try and get to this belt. So from what I can see, we've got 1, 2, 3 screws to get to the belt. There's our pot on the back for adjusting the speed. So the thing that's in the way is this little clip here. So we're just going to snip that and then replace that towards the end. Just pull that through. And then very carefully, I'm going to attempt to get these screws out holding the motor plate in place, which is, this is the first one. Buried deep in here. That's loose actually. These are all quite loose. There's 2. So now, in theory, this should come out, but there's a little bit of jiggery pokery to be done with all these wires. It's not particularly easy to remove that plate actually with all this in the way. And then we have our belt and a particularly dirty capstan. So this plate now needs wiggling in between all your wires, but also not getting mixed up, because they kind of got to go back in a certain way. So that's a wire to the tape selector switch. And I'm going to pull this capstan in order to clean it. There's a bit of force because on the other side there's our usual plastic washer. There's our capstan. this little spacer washer on this side. And if I can just wiggle this around this way, we have a usual plastic returning washer there on the other side. So I'm going to try and position this somewhere where nothing's going to get damaged, which I'll do is over there. And it's time to give this capstan a good clean. As if by magic, that stuff did not want to come off at all. So a little bit of wet and dry on there and just took all that. It was like a varnish coat and it was horrible. And if you notice a little bit on the end there where it's going to be affected by your tape. So now that's done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some oil on the shaft. What I don't like doing is putting it directly into the bearings. And the simple reason is you're putting the bearings, when you put this in, you're going to get oil on this end, which is obviously going to touch the tape, which is bad. So now I've done this, let's try and wiggle this over here, pop our brass little washer on, carefully not to cover it in oil. And now I'm going to reinsert this capstan into the bearings. Beautiful. And then you need to get your see-through washer. And we're going to pop that back over there. And that retains your capstan in place. There we go. So, capstan done. A bit more complicated now. New belt. Okay, I think we are. Yep, that's us. So now it's just a case of firing these screws in and belt's done. Let's just secure these wires with a nice new cable tie. Okay, so all of our wires are nicely tucked away from the motor. Everything's tidy and secure. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the, just make sure I'm not damaging anything by resting it down this way. I'm going to put our pinch roller back on next. Pinch roller sits on this shaft here. I'm just going to give it the tiniest little touch of oil. What we have first is a spring here, which we need to connect up. So first of all, I'm going to connect this up to the hole on the plate, like so. And then sit that pinch roller on there without damaging the spring. And then there's a C-clip to go there. There's a C-clip that holds it in place. This is where I fling it all over the place. So I'm just going to sit it in its beginning position and then use a pair of pliers to squish it down. Like so. So when the transport moves up and down, pinch rollers meeting the capstan. Just a little bit more of a second as to how this works. So this brass bushing here is connected to the second motor, and when that motor turns, when you press forward, fast forward or rewind, it'll move across to the right way, and then the tyre will come up to it and connect this brass bush here with the reels, therefore turning the reels whichever way. Quite clever, really. You know, it's got to have some kind of rubberized contact between the two, which on this case is the tyre instead of a belt. Not really seen that in anything else other than this transport, which I think is a Sankyo or something like that. Pretty impressive, really. It is a weak point. Generally, all these seem to need that tyre, and that's usually the main cause of any faults. But we'll get that changed now, and then we can get this back into the unit. I'm going to inspect. This is the left-hand hinge of the door, so if I press eject, which is this button up here, this will free this a little bit. Allow it to move. So once you press eject, this is free to move, and the pivot points down here look a bit manky, if I'm honest. So we're going to clean those up. And there's like a piston on the side here, like a damper. That's also full of rubbish. So if I can remove this, I can pull this out, give it a clean and re-grease it, I think. I managed to get that clip off there, so it just basically just popped off. So now that's off. This is going to fly across the room. Ugh. Yeah, there's a rubber hose seal in there and it's full of all sorts. So I'm going to scoosh this out, grease that rubber hose seal, and we should be good. That was just all grease, basically. I'm going to put probably an excessive amount on here, and then wipe it off towards the end. And then now a nice clean piston with its hose seal on the end. You can just go in there. Yep. And then attach that back onto the arm with its clip. Like so. Alright. A lot better. I'm also going to grease this point down here. I have to give it a little bit of a clean with some IPA. And just wipe off a bit of excess. A lot smoother. Now I've got our tyre, it takes a little bit of skill to get the new one on, to be honest with you. I've found the easiest thing to do is to thread it underneath the wheel and the brass pulley there like this. And then using two of your thumbs and fingers and a little bit of luck, you can kind of push it over the rest of the wheel, which is fragile, but it does work. And now it's working well. Now that's done, then we can get this transport back in the into the chassis. Don't forget, first thing you need to do is attach that chassis ground. It's a blue wire, quite a tight screw, so just make sure that's down. And then watching out for your top switches and everything else, just carefully slide that back into the chassis. Like so. Once it's in place, you've got the screws with the pointy washers on, one on the top, and just screw it down. Next then is onto your plugs. They're all pretty straightforward, they're all different sizes. It's impossible, I'd say, to get these mixed up. There isn't even two that are remotely similar. The one I've picked up there is your power for your motors. There's 4 in total, and then you got one over here, and the last one is this little 2-pin one down the back down here, which is to your recording head, I believe. And then 2 screws underneath, same spiky washers, and you're in. Stick your faceplate on, screw that down, 2 small black screws, make sure it's seated. Then you can stick your right hand arm back in with a little bit of grease after you've given it a good IPA and a clean out. That sits in 2 holes, one circular and one's kind of rectangular to let it open and close. And then you can screw that faceplate down onto there. There is little locating pins for this as well to help you seat it properly before you screw it down. And then it's 4 countersunk black screws. It's the only black countersunk screws that there is on the entire unit, so it's pretty easy not to get them mixed up. I'm going to leave the faceplate off for now so I can adjust the azimuth later. It ejects a lot better with the plastic on the faceplate to give it a bit more weight. So while the entire front is off, it's best to give it a bit of a clean out, get all the dust and bits and bobs off them and behind them nooks and crannies, because once it's on, it's quite difficult to get behind it. And once I've had a scoosh through this, I'm going to take that perspex cover off the levels, because there's dust behind it. This just unclips, one on the top, one on the bottom, obviously being very careful not to break it because you won't get another one. And then it just lifts out and you can get behind it, and there's basically like with the information, the levels and the numbers, is just a little piece of plastic. So I'll just give that a little bit of a wipe down, just with a dry cloth so as not to damage anything. And using a little bit of Windoline, I like to clean the back and front of this to get it looking as best as possible, and that just pops straight back down and snaps into place, being super gentle. Then you need to get your front panel, and it's time to fit it. This does kind of slide left and right, there's no ends on it, so you have to line up the buttons with the holes as you put it down, because you might find it doesn't seat very well if it's not perfectly aligned. Best way to do it is via the tape selector switches. You can see whether they're going to fit or not, and then push it all the way down until it clicks, and just make sure all your 4 push fit connectors are in place. And then it's 2 countersunk brass screws into the top. One of them goes underneath a bit of foam if you can't find a hole. That's them. And one left and one right. It's starting to look like a cassette deck again now, actually. And then any switches you've took off to give a clean, just make sure to go back on. Don't lose them. And then for this one, I've actually just popped that eject switch back in after I've cleaned it and give it a bit of a polish, and it seemed to have solved the problem as well. That seems to be working absolutely fine. Once it's on its deck, the eject is a little quicker. I'm going to tidy my cables up from the cable ties that I clipped earlier in order to get some access, and try and get it looking as OEM as possible, as if nobody's been there. Bit of a mess of cables inside these, but what can you do? And then just snip the ends. Alright, so now it's going to stick our nice straight base back on again, and this is 5 screws, 6 screws even. Once it's in place, just go around and screw them all in. One of these screws is longer than the other ones, the one that goes through the faceplate in the middle. And that's us done with the transport onto electrical calibration. Last mechanical adjustment to be made is this little screw at the end of the damper. So this damper, depending on whether you turn it clockwise or anti-clockwise, will slow and speed up how your door ejects. So now we've cleaned up that O seal that's in there and whatever else got rid of the gunk, you notice this doesn't just flick out and take your arm off. So it's a little bit kind of, it doesn't do it all very smoothly, but with the taping it's a bit smoother. It just means it's not flicking out straight off the cuff, and it's dampening rather than just flicking it out on the spring. So that's another job done, and I think for this, mechanical wise, we're about done. There's so many electrical adjustments on this that I'm going to cover them in a different video, from the speed of the motor. We've got some pots there for the level meters, pots for playback level, which we'll have to do with the oscilloscope. Loads of other pots over here for the Dolby and whatnot, and there's some resistors we can change out to improve the sound. So in the next video, I think in part 2, we'll get it hooked up to the oscilloscope and see what we can do. Thanks, bye!